Hey, Judge, I see your test video on here. Is there is it that yours, the mock trial is just not showing up yet?
It's loading right now.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. Super excited about that. I can't wait to hear that, how that goes. All right, where is
We should be streaming on YouTube. It's telling me that it's recording.
And let's see here.
I don't see it on there. I see the agreed orders by submission and the test
That
video.
you have to go to live video.
Oh, go to live video. Huh. I don't see a live video option, but I'm not very tech savvy, so I don't know. I'm just not doing it right.
I think Kyle's having trouble logging in.
Okay, I don't, let's see here. I don't see him even.
Okay. I'm wondering which one, because I'm looking at it.
You see it? You see the mock trial live?
I'm on the YouTube channel right now looking at it.
Huh. Okay. Maybe try to close it and open it up again.
I do.
Okay, one more. Oh, there he is. Okay, now I think we have everybody.
Just a pointer to Violet and Mr. Hudson. Your names need to be changed.
And just so you know, the YouTube is there's a 20-second delay on YouTube. So if you have that up and you have Zoom up, you're going to hear it twice, like every 20 seconds it'll come up.
Okay. Mr. Arrington, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was
Okay.
trying to help my family watch it on YouTube, and then I was just telling her what Judge Perwin just said about the 20-second delay, and I might, well, maybe not. I've got earphones in, so it may not affect me, but if you all hear some weird feedback, I might have to move them like downstairs or something. Okay. Abby, you have a question?
Just making sure one last time, we don't have to like
Oh.
stand up for the opening, closing, or questioning, right?
I'm sorry, ask that again.
The opening, closing, and questioning, the attorneys don't have to stand up or anything?
No.
Okay.
No, we want you to stay in the screen. And so everyone can just stay seated. Are we missing anybody?
I think we are. No, we're not. I think that's everyone.
Barbara Barrett's trying to escape. Oh, there she is.
Did you have any luck finding it? Oh,
We want you to stay in the screen. And so
Mr. Arrington, she's
yes, ma'am. What's that? What's that?
I think Gina has the wrong.
I just heard Judge Perwin say we want you to stay in the screen, but
all right. So do we have everybody?
I believe
She's trying
we
to
do.
get into the trial.
Is Ms. Newell the only person that sounds choppy, or is that everyone?
Nah, it's just Miss Newell.
Just Miss Newell for me, sir.
Okay. Judge, I do believe we have everyone. I see 9 students. That's all we have is 9 students, plus our director, myself, and you. So
Yes, there should be.
I think that's everybody.
Okay.
Yep, you should be all set.
All right, Ms. Newell, do you want to start off?
Sure. Everybody see? Okay. I lost a couple of videos, but that's okay. I just want to say I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has put into this. And I know that everyone's a little nervous, but today's going to go just fine. We're going to have a good experience. And I'd like to open us with a word of prayer, if that's all right.
That sounds great.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for watching over this class and being with us throughout the year. And I know that this is trying times for people, but we appreciate that you are with us, and we know that we can rest on your strength and have peace no matter what may come. And I just pray that you will remind all of us throughout this mock trial today that we can all rely on you and that we are all in this together. We are here to have fun and to learn something and to come out of this with just an educational experience. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. So, is everyone prepared? And Judge Pruin, would you like to swear our witnesses in for us, or do we need to file the charge first?
No, what we'll do first is this is the state versus Barbara Barrett.
Okay.
And before we get started, I need anyone who's going to testify to raise their right hands. Anyone who's going to testify, I need you to raise your right hand. All right, do each of you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yes.
Sir.
All right, y'all can put your hands down. All right, let's go ahead and begin with the charge.
Okay.
Mr. Arrington, is that going to be done in the form of an opening statement, or is the charge something y'all are doing before? I can't remember how we've done that.
You know, I don't believe we've ever actually done a charge other than 1 year. I think we asked the defense team to essentially enter a plea right before the trial started of either just plain not guilty by reason of self-defense, or not guilty by reason of insanity. But we haven't always done that, so we could just go straight into openings if you want.
We'll do it however y'all want to do it.
Okay.
So I guess we go to opening statements then.
I'd say let's just go straight to openings.
Yeah. All right.
So
who's going to do opening?
Okay.
For the prosecution.
I will, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was under the impression that the defense gives their plea before the opening.
Say that again.
Right. I
Is
think
the defense going to give their plea before the opening?
Okay, Ms. Newell, do you want to take over on that? I'm not sure exactly how we're going to handle if we do it. We'll do it however y'all want to do it. I'm fine with that. So sounds like she wanted to hear the plea before she does her opening.
That is what we've traditionally layout for the mock trial. After
Okay, well,
the judge's opening remarks, there is supposed to be a plea entered.
All right, so Ms. Barrett, how do you plea in this case?
Yeah. Defendant enters plea
Are y'all having trouble hearing Ms. Newell?
Yes.
Yes.
I think yeah, total time.
Judge, why don't we just have one of the defense attorneys indicate which version of the not guilty they're going
That
to
would be great.
enter. So if either Kyle or Israel, if one of you could just enter the plea real quick, that would be helpful. You're both muted. I don't know if you realize that, but
We are trying to prove Barbara innocent just because she didn't do it.
so a not guilty plea.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Now we'll proceed with opening statements,
Sir.
and that'll be the prosecution.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Abby Newell, and allow me to introduce my co-counsel, Brooke Hoybach. The plaintiff in this case is not a single person, but our good state of South Carolina. The plaintiff is everyone in this room, everyone in this town, everyone in this state. We are here today because someone shot and killed Mr. Barrett. Mrs. Barrett is being charged with murder, and we intend to show you that she did just that. We intend to show you that she not only shot and killed him, but she did so with malice aforethought and premeditation. We will show how on the night of December 18th, 1988, Mr. and Mrs. Barrett argued about the contents of a letter that Mr. Barrett had written to his paramour Alan Barrett has pled not guilty, but we will prove that this is not the truth. We will not only show that there is more than enough evidence to convict Mrs. Barrett of this crime, but there is enough evidence to convict her beyond reasonable doubt. However, we will not stop there. We will prove that she not only shot her husband, she murdered him. We will show how Mrs. Barrett did not go insane that night, nor was she acting out of self-defense. We will show that Mrs. Barrett committed this crime and that she meant to do it. The plaintiff, the state, is charging her with this good crime which goes against the laws of this state, the laws of this country, and the laws of the good book which it was built on. Murder is defined as the killing of another person with malice aforethought, either expressed or implied. And this is exactly what we will prove she did. We will prove that Mrs. Barrett is guilty of the murder of her husband, John Barrett, another human being. We will prove that she did it and that she was not acting out of insanity nor self-defense. One of our witnesses we will call to the stand will be Officer Chaney, the reporting officer that dreadful night. Officer Chaney is an experienced officer who is continuing to even further his education in criminal justice. Officer Chaney will give testimony to what he saw, what he heard, and what he observed, and what he concluded that night. He will give testimony to how Mrs. Barrett not only admitting to hurting her husband, but also had the knowledge of doing so. Another one of our witnesses to the stand will be Dr. Joe R. May. Dr. May was the pathologist who performed the medical examination of John Barrett. He will give testimony to the observations he made, the things he recorded, and what he concluded. He will give testimony to the order, placement, and direction of the bullet wounds on Mr. Barrett. He will give testimony to how Mr. Barrett was killed by a final shot to the head, one fired while he was helplessly laying face down on the floor. Our final witness to the stand is Ms. Leigh Porter. Ms. Porter is the one who called the police that night. She was the housekeeper for the Barretts and was the only other person in the house when the shooting went down. Mrs. Porter is a hardworking woman and an honest one. She will give testimony to what she saw that night, the horrors she saw that night. She will give testimony to witnessing Mrs. Barrett chasing the terrified. Also witnessed how earlier that day, Mrs. Barrett was in the backyard with a gun and she could hear shots being fired. Finally, she will testify to how Mrs. Barrett was anxiously waiting for Mr. Barrett to get home, pacing up and down the halls. We're asking the to find get a evade her just punishment and get away with her crimes against our good state of South Carolina.
All right, if we can get an opening from the defense.
May it please the court, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Today, we would like to tell you about the life of a battered woman and who suffered abuse from the hands of her merciless husband. But trapped by the drama of a battered woman, she was unable to break free from the husband she loved. My name is Israel Vargas, and this is my co-counsel, Kyle Hudson. We are all here today because of what happened on the 19th night of December 1988 in Haydenville, South Carolina. The issue in the case today is to resolve the unjust accusations charged against Mrs. Barrett. My co-counsel and I will show you, the jury, that there is not enough evidence to accuse Barbara of a crime she did not commit. The evidence will show that on the night of John Walker Barrett's death, he arrives home at approximately 9 p.m. As him and his wife sat in the living room, Mr. Barrett informs Mrs. Barrett about wanting a divorce and wanting to marry someone else. She didn't believe he wanted a divorce, nor was she able to comprehend why he wanted to marry someone else. They were both agitated and continued to argue throughout dinner. She had been weeping profusely whenever he ordered her to leave the room. He followed her into the living room with a belt in his hands. After countless years of being brutally beaten by her merciless, uncaring, cruel-hearted husband, my co-counsel and I believe that Barbara would have had every right to fire a gun, but the 6 shots fired were not Barbara's doing, but someone else's. Our first witness will be Dana McGuire, who is a practicing psychologist and who had a chance to interview Mrs. Barrett 3 times before this trial. She will demonstrate what women go through in a battering cycle and the helpless pressure that Mrs. Barrett was under. Mrs. Barrett will help prove that we don't know who committed the awful crime that night, and because of the great sadness and devastation of her husband wanting a divorce, the unbearable grief disrupted her thought patterns. Therefore, she was unable to think soundly and could not keep her train of thought and remembered nothing during that horrific moment. The state has the burden to prove if Mrs. Barrett committed the unjust act of murder. Today, my co-counsel and I ask you, the jury, to judge Barbara Allen Barrett not guilty.
Thank you. Is the prosecution ready to call their first witness?
I'd like to call up Officer Chaney.
All right. Go right ahead. Which prosecution attorney is going to question Officer Chaney?
Oh, I will be questioning him.
Okay, our other prosecution attorney is on mute. I just want to make sure that she knows that. So that's fine if you did that intentionally. All right, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Please state your whole name for the record.
CM Chaney.
What is your age?
I am 28 years old.
Are you married or in a relationship?
Yes, I am. I'm married.
Do you your officer Chaney?
Come again, please. She froze.
Yeah, let's give her a minute to get back online.
Yeah, this it keeps booting us off.
It might be a tactic by the defense.
I think that's what it is.
Yes. All right, our prosecution attorney, because you signed back in, it mutes you. So you'll have to, you automatically come in muted. So we'll need to unmute. There we go. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, go right ahead.
Can I repeat my last question? I missed his answer.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Are you a college graduate?
Yes.
What degree do you have?
I have a degree in criminal justice from the South Bend College in Haddonfield.
Are you still invested in your education?
Yes, I am. I've taken 9 hours towards my advanced degree in criminal justice from the Campbell State University in Haddonfield.
What is your occupation?
I'm a police officer.
Where do you work for?
I work for the Milton County Police Department.
Do you have any other jobs?
I'm also a security guard for a bank.
Is that a second full-time job?
No, it's part-time.
What do you do specifically for the Milton County Police Department?
You're right that it was self-defense or insanity, though.
I'm part of the Radio Patrol Division.
What are your normal hours?
My normal hours are 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. Tuesday through Saturday.
How long have you worked for the Milton County Police Department?
8 years.
How long have you been part of the Radio Patrol Division?
The entirety of my time working there.
Have you had the same hours the whole time you worked there?
Yes.
Are you accustomed to these hours?
Yes, I am.
During your time in the Radio Patrol Division, have you been called to the scene of a homicide?
Yes, I have.
How many times have you been called to the scene of a homicide?
Multiple.
Has that taught you anything?
Yes, it's taught me how to preserve physical evidence and take accurate measurements of the scene of the crime.
Who is the officer dispatched to 2437 Rambling Woods Drive on the night of December 18th, 1988?
I was.
What were you called for?
A shooting.
What time were you called?
At 9:50 p.m.
What time did you arrive?
About 9:57 p.m.
Whose house was it?
It was the house of John Walker Barrett.
I think Kyle is crossing him. I really hope they don't make me do it.
I'm sorry, officer, I missed your last answer.
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, whose house was it?
John Walker Barrett.
Did you record your actions and observations from that night anywhere?
Yes, I did in my police report.
It's not very distracting.
Could we please pull up Prosecution Exhibit 1 for entering into evidence? Permission to approach witness?
Right ahead.
Do you recognize this, Officer Chaney?
Yes, it is my police report.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to enter Prosecution Exhibit 1.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, prosecution exhibit 1 is admitted.
When did you write up this report?
On the night of the shooting?
Is it an accurate recording of everything you observed and concluded that night?
Yes.
Could you please read the first sentence?
While on routine patrol, I received a dispatch to make the scene of a shooting at 2437 Rambling Woods in the Glenmont area of the city.
Was that a normal routine patrol?
Yes.
Did you work that patrol often?
Yes.
our next witness too.
I missed your last answer. Officer, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Is that a part of the city you worked in frequently?
Yes.
Were you met by anyone at the scene?
Yes, I was met by the reportee Leigh Porter.
How was she acting?
She was hysterical and crying.
Was there anyone else in the house?
There was the actor and the deceased.
Could you please read from your report, starting from the reportee pointed to through in the case?
The reportee pointed to the body of what appeared to be a deceased male lying face down in the dining room area with his head facing north. He was covered with blood and had a piece of paper in his hand, which I removed and tagged as evidence in the case.
Who was the deceased?
John Walker Barrett.
Who identified him?
Leigh Porter.
Did he have a relation to anyone at the scene?
He was the husband of the actor.
Were there any bullet wounds on the deceased?
Yes, multiple.
Could you please read the part of that paragraph discussing the bullet wounds?
He was lying in a pool of blood and appeared to have several bullet wounds to his body, including one wound to the back of the head, one to the right back thigh, and several to the back.
From your observations, did they appear to be self-inflicted?
No, they did not.
Would you please read the remainder of the paragraph?
The victim's head was approximately 2 feet from the door leading to the breakfast room from the dining room. The paper which I removed and tagged as evidence was found crumpled in his right hand under the hand as he lay on the floor. He was lying face down with his head turned toward the left. He was wearing a white button-down shirt, a tie that had been loosened, blue-gray suit pants, black wingtip shoes, and black socks.
Which room was he in?
The dining room.
Was there anything else near him?
There's a 38 caliber Smith & Wesson with a 6-inch barrel.
Could you please read the part of your report about the gun? It's the bottom of the third paragraph. You don't need to read the last sentence.
Next to the victim, I found a 38 caliber Smith & Wesson with a 6-inch barrel, serial number SND 2153867. I tagged the gun as evidence and submitted it to homicide property. There were 6 spent rounds of 38 caliber ammo taken from the pistol and tagged with it.
Were there any bullets still left in the gun?
No, they were all used.
Were there any blood stains at the crime scene?
Yes.
Could you please read the beginning of the third paragraph and then the 12th line down, the part discussing the bloodstains?
The signs of disorder at the scene included the following. In the living room, there were several large splotches of blood leading from sofa number 2 through the living room and into the dining room where the victim came to rest. There is one large blood stain, still damp, on the right-hand cushion of sofa number 2 as I faced the sofa. The cushion on which I found the blood was the cushion which was positioned against the back of the sofa and vertical to the floor. Approximately 5 feet high on the right-hand door between the living room and the dining room was a large blood smear. This smear was located approximately 2 feet above the door handle and towards the edge. The blood was still wet.
Did you record a layout of these bloodstains anywhere?
Yes, in the scene diagram I prepared with this report.
Your Honor, I'd like to pull up Prosecution Exhibit 2, diagram of the house. Permission to approach witness.
Go ahead.
Do you recognize this, Officer Chaney?
Yes, it is. Yes, I do. It is the scene diagram of the house.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd like to enter Prosecution Exhibit 2.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Right. Prosecution Exhibit number 2 is admitted.
Are the bloodstains accurately recorded on your diagram?
Yes.
Was there anything else on the floor in the living room?
There was a legal-sized envelope, a man's jacket, and a man's belt.
Could we have him reading from his report while the diagram remains up on the screen?
Judge Berwin?
Yes.
Is that allowable?
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was physically possible. That's why I didn't say anything. I have no
Oh, okay.
problem with, both exhibits have been admitted, so he can refer to either one of those.
Okay. I will try to get them both up on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was physically possible. That's why I didn't say anything.
Okay. Let me see what I can do.
If I may, worst case scenario, we could just toggle back and forth between the two.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to actually have them both up on the screen.
You could maybe shrink the report, even just the words of it, maybe.
Okay. Well, let's see.
And water is okay in the courtroom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said water is okay.
Oh,
Sorry about this.
No, this is new for everybody. Except maybe the attorneys.
This is not going to let me do both at the same time. I'm sorry. I'm
okay.
going to have to go back and forth.
Well then, could you please read the part of your report that records the placement of the jacket and the belt? It begins on the 8th line down of the
Mrs. Newell? If you pull
Yes,
the
sir.
tabs out, you could put them side by side.
Pull them out.
Yes, like click on it
Pull it
and
out
then
how?
drag it down and put it next to this one.
Okay.
No,
Like
it's not
that?
working.
Oh, I see what you mean. Hang on. No, it didn't come up that way. Now I think I messed up my evidence. All right. Hang on. Oh, there we go. All right. How's that?
Okay.
I can still only see the diagram of the house.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
that's all I can see also.
Okay. I guess I can only share, I can have it on my screen, but I can only share one.
Oh,
So, okay.
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 So could we go to the report then?
The report.
Yes, please. Officer, could you please read the part
Okay.
of your report that records the placement of the jacket and the belt? It begins on the 8th line down of the 3rd paragraph.
A man's jacket containing material similar to the material found in the pants of the deceased was wearing was crumpled and lying on the floor next to sofa number 2, between sofa number 2 and the table. A black man's belt was also found on top of the coat. There was also a legal-sized envelope with the words Tootsie written on the front. It had been ripped open.
We could go back to the diagram now.
Yes.
Okay. Why, officer, do the jacket and belt not appear to be between the sofa and the table on your diagram?
Because in order to show the locations of the blood stains, we had to move them over slightly.
What had previously been in the envelope?
The Tootsie letter,
How did you say the envelope had been opened?
it had been ripped open.
Was there anything else on or near the sofas?
There was a glass of wine and scotch.
Could you please read the part of your report about those? Still on the 3rd paragraph.
There was a glass of red wine with lipstick marks on the rims sitting on the table on the north side of sofa number 1. The glass was half full. There was also a full glass of scotch sitting on the table located between the sofas.
Did you know who was drinking from which glass? Or were you able to conclude?
Yes, I believe Miss Barrett was drinking the wine and Mr. Barrett was drinking the scotch.
How full was the wine glass?
Half full.
Could you reasonably conclude from this that Mrs. Barrett had been in the living room for quite a few minutes?
Yes.
If you could please go back to the diagram. Does your diagram accurately record the size of the house?
Yes.
Why, then, by size comparison, is Mr. Barrett 11 feet tall and the arms of his jacket 13 feet across?
Because so that we were able to view all of the items within the diagram, we enlarged some of them.
Approximately how far away is sofa number 1 from the dining room?
40 feet.
Then, did you tag anything at the scene of the crime?
Yes, I tagged the .38 caliber Smith & Wesson in the Tootsie letter.
Your Honor,
And the 6 spent rounds.
Okay. Sorry about that. I would like to pull up Prosecution 3, the Tootsie letter. Permission to approach witness.
You may approach.
Do you recognize this, officer?
Yes, it is the letter that I removed from the hands of the deceased.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to enter Prosecution Exhibit 3.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Prosecution Exhibit 3 is admitted.
Thank you. When is this letter dated, officer?
The 16th of December, 1988.
How many days before the incident was that?
3.
Could you please read 3 sentences from the first paragraph, beginning with "all these years"?
All these years being married to Barbara have been a living hell for me. As you know, Barbara is a really fine person, but her possessiveness and her drug habits have become a burden I can no longer bear. I have tried all these years to hide it from our friends, but I can try no longer.
So Mrs. Barrett was a possessive wife?
According to this letter, yes.
She was also a drug addict?
According to this letter, yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to bring back up Prosecution Exhibit 1B report. Could you please read the first sentence under details of the offense?
The exact details of the offense are unknown, but the following was found after talking to the reportee and viewing the physical evidence at the scene.
What do you mean by the exact details are unknown?
I was not there when the shooting occurred. However, we believe that this is what occurred.
Could you please read the next sentence?
The deceased was the husband of the actor Barbara Allen Barrett.
What does actor mean? Not in the theatrical sense, but in the sense of this case.
A suspect in the case.
Could you please read the first 2 sentences of the second paragraph?
The deceased came home around 9 p.m. He is a prominent criminal defense attorney with the firm of Barrett and Williams in Haddonfield.
What was his job?
He was a defense attorney.
What did Mr. Barrett do right after he got home?
He put down his briefcase and went to the dining room.
You could read the next sentence of your report, please.
He left his briefcase by the door and went to the living room.
Thank you. And what do the next 3 sentences say?
He and the actor had an argument because the deceased was planning on divorcing the actor and moving out the next day. Apparently, the actor had found the letter the deceased had written to his paramour and had confronted the deceased with it. This confrontation probably occurred after dinner, or at least at that point.
When did you conclude the confrontation happened?
At least after dinner.
If we could please go to the second page of Prosecution Exhibit 1. It's the second half of his. Thank you. Could you please read the first 2 sentences of the next paragraph?
According to the housekeeper, Leigh Porter, the deceased and the actor had an argument in the living room and then went into the dining room to eat dinner. During dinner, Porter heard the deceased say that he still wanted the divorce and he was glad she knew everything.
Did Mrs. Barrett clearly understand why and for what Mr. Barrett was leaving her?
Yes?
Could you please read the next 3 lines, the part about what happened after that?
The actor left the dining room and the deceased followed. Prior to leaving the dining room, the actor said that the deceased would be sorry for his actions. From the placement of the bloodstains, it is probable that the deceased and the actor quarreled further over the contents of the letter, and the actor got out her gun and shot the deceased in the left arm as he sat on sofa number 2.
What happened when the second shot was fired?
She shot him in the right leg, in the thigh area.
What was the deceased doing when the shot was fired?
Running away.
Where was the third shot fired?
It hit the wall.
Which wall did it hit?
It hit the wall that I specified in the previous page of my report.
Where were the final shots fired?
In the dining room,
Where did they hit the deceased?
in the back and the head.
How many shots were fired total?
6.
How many shots were fired while the deceased was facing the actor?
1.
Did you ever locate the actor?
Yes, she was hiding in a bathroom downstairs,
What was she doing?
crying.
How did you get her out of the bathroom?
I threatened to break the door down if she did not come out.
Did she come out?
Yes,
What happened after she came out of the bathroom?
she collapsed in my arms.
Where did she go after that? What happened to her?
I called a paramedic and she went into the kitchen.
Did she say anything while she was in the kitchen?
Yes. She continued to say things like, I didn't mean to hurt John. Why did he have to hurt me so? I loved him. Why did he have to leave?
Were those her exact words?
Yes.
So she admitted that she had indeed hurt her husband,
Yes.
and she realized that she had.
Yes.
Did you ask her anything after that?
I asked her if her husband had threatened her in any way before she shot him.
And what was her answer?
She stated he had not.
She once again confirmed that she had shot her husband.
Yes.
Was Mrs. Barrett taken into custody?
Yes.
When?
After my search of the house.
Did she give a statement?
Yes,
Who obtained this statement?
I did.
Your Honor, I'd like to bring up Prosecution Exhibit 4, Confession of Barbara Allen Barrett. Yeah, I think that's it. Permission to approach witness.
Go right ahead.
Do you recognize this, Officer Chaney?
Yes, it is the confession with officer's warnings.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes.
Is that your signature at the bottom of the page?
Yes.
Is that Mrs. Barrett's signature at the bottom of the page?
Yes.
Okay. When was this confession obtained?
The night of the shooting.
Was she read her Miranda warnings?
I have no specific recollection of reading her Miranda warnings. However, I've made a habit of doing so, so I'm very confident that I did.
Did she sign this statement in your presence?
Yes.
Was she forced to sign it?
No.
Was she threatened to sign it?
No.
Was she promised anything for signing it?
No.
Did she ever ask for the questioning to be stopped?
No.
Did she ever ask for an attorney?
No.
Did Mrs. Barrett indicate that this confession was true and correct?
Yes.
Did she sign it voluntarily?
Yes, she did.
Would you please read the top paragraph of this confession?
I, Barbara Allen Barrett, have been warned by CM Chaney, the person whom this statement is made, that 1, I have the right to have a lawyer present to advise me both prior and during any questioning. 2, if unable to employ a lawyer, I have the right to have a lawyer appointed to counsel with me both prior and during any questioning. 3, I have the right to remain silent and not make any statement at all, and any statement I make may and probably will be used in evidence against me at my trial. And 4, I have the right to terminate the interview at any time I so desire.
Was this at the top of the statement she signed that night?
Yes.
What does the following line say?
I fully understand all of these rights, and desiring to waive all of them, I hereby make the following voluntary statement.
She waived all of her rights?
Yes.
What does the second sentence of the final paragraph say after 9 o'clock?
He told me he wanted a divorce and that he wanted to marry someone else.
She once again confirmed that she knew why Mr. Barrett was leaving her.
Yes.
Could you please read then through Stay With Me?
We both went into dinner and talked more about the divorce. I remember I was crying a lot. I could not eat, so I went into the living room and poured myself a glass of wine. He followed me. I think he was drinking scotch. We argued some more and I begged him to stay with me.
Thank you. Was this confirmed by anything at the scene?
Yes, the glass of wine and scotch.
Based on your observations, at this point, did Mr. Barrett also have the letter?
Yes.
Does Mrs. Barrett ever mention a belt in this confession?
No.
Did she ever say anything about one to you?
No.
That's all. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, does the defense wish to cross-examine?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go right ahead.
At what time did you receive a call to report to the scene of a shooting at 2437 Rambling Woods Drive?
9:50 p.m.
At what time did you arrive at the scene?
About 9:57 p.m.
Who was there and when did you arrive at the scene?
Leigh Porter and I arrived there at about 9:57 p.m.
Did you hear any gunshots while you were at the scene?
No.
So Mr. Barrett must have been shot before you arrived.
Yes.
Someone could have left the house in the 7 minutes that it took you to arrive at the scene, correct?
Yes.
You did not see who shot Mr. Barrett, right?
Yes.
What was the reportee doing when you arrived?
They were crying.
Who was the reportee?
Leigh Porter.
What did you tag as evidence that was in the hand of the deceased?
A letter labeled Tootsie.
Officer Chaney, what was the deceased wearing?
He was wearing a white button-down shirt, black suit pants, a tie that had been loosened, black wingtip shoes, and black socks.
What was on the rim of the wine glass?
Lipstick.
What was on the table located between the sofas?
A glass of scotch.
The material of the jacket matched the material of the pants, right?
Yes.
What color was the belt on top of the jacket?
Black.
What was on the northwest side of sofa number 1?
Glass, legal-sized envelope.
What was 5 feet high and on the right-hand door between the living room and the dining room?
A blood stain.
How long was the barrel of the gun you found next to the victim?
6-inch.
What company made it?
Smith & Wesson.
What was the caliber of the gun?
.38.
All of this information I just asked you about was recorded in your police report, right?
Yes.
To whom was the letter found from Mr. Barrett addressed?
Tootsie.
Who is Tootsie?
His paramour.
So we have another woman here who's also involved with this abusive man, correct?
Yes.
Between Mrs. Barrett, Tootsie, and the 2 housekeepers, we have 4 women who had reason to gain access to Mr. Barrett, right?
Yes.
Where did you find Barbara Barrett?
In the bathroom downstairs.
What was she doing?
Crying.
You threatened to break down the door of an innocent woman who could have just been using the bathroom, correct?
Yes.
What did Barbara do after she came out of the bathroom?
Collapsed into my arms.
Where did she fall again?
Into my arms. It's on the floor.
Did you give a statement different than this one?
No.
Do you remember giving a statement prior to this testimony at the trial?
No.
You didn't give a statement prior to this trial?
Yes, I did.
I would like to bring up Prosecution Exhibit Number 1.
All right, go ahead.
Can you go to the second page? Officer Chaney, this is your police report that you made based on the night of John Walker Barrett's death, correct?
Yes.
Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Can you please read that whole second paragraph under details of the offense continued?
Prior to making an investigation of the scene, I attempted to locate the actor, Barbara Allen Barrett. She had locked herself in a downstairs bathroom and would not come out. I could hear her screaming and crying. After telling her that I would have to break down the door to come out, she opened the door and collapsed onto the floor. It took several minutes to revive her. We called a doctor to her and sat her in the kitchen at a table. She continued to say things like, "I didn't mean to."
You can stop here. Do you agree that she fell on the floor?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. How long did it take to revive her?
Several minutes.
What did she say after you sat her down at the kitchen table?
"I didn't mean to hurt John. Why did he have to hurt me so? I loved him. Why did he have to leave?"
If I punched you in the arm hard enough, I would hurt you, right?
Yes.
But I wouldn't kill you, would I?
No.
What did she say after you sat her down at... Sorry. Did Mrs. Barrett specify whether it was an emotional or physical hurt?
No.
Either way, though, whether emotional or physical, hurt does not mean kill, correct?
Yes.
So while Mrs. Barrett may have hurt Mr. Barrett with her angry words, that doesn't solve the mystery of Mr. Barrett's death, right?
Yep.
No further questions, Your Honor. Actually, sorry. I do have more questions.
All right, go ahead.
How long was it from the time of Mrs. Barrett's arrival at the police station to the time you took her statement?
I do not remember.
Do you agree that Barbara just lost the husband she loved? She was screaming and crying, covered from passing out, and you took her official statement within 30 minutes?
Yes.
Can you testify about the exact details of the offense?
No.
Because you have stated that the exact you've stated that the exact details of the offense are not known, right?
Yes.
During the night of the shooting, when you were talking to Leigh Porter, was she ever under oath, or did she swear to any of the information she gave you?
I believe so. No, she did not.
Did you gather the information that you took from her, and did you present it as fact in your police report?
I believe so.
Okay. You reported the time Mr. Barrett came home that night from talking to Miss Porter, right?
Yes.
And you reported the Barretts were involved in a divorce based on Miss Porter's words, correct?
Yes.
And only a moment before, Leigh Porter was crying and hysterical, correct?
Yes.
So just like you did with Barbara, you took your information from a traumatized person?
Yes.
You have a spouse and 2 daughters who are 5 and 3, correct?
Yes.
Your police work hours are from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Plus, you are working an extra job as a security guard on most of your off hours, correct?
Yes.
On the night of Mr. Barrett's death, your partner wasn't there to back you up, correct?
Yes.
So after a full day of working your off-hour duty job, you dealt with 2 traumatized persons, mapped out the scene, wrote down the inexact details of the offense, and handled all of the paperwork by yourself, correct?
Yes.
Which leg on John Walker Barrett was shot from his point of view?
The right.
Referring back to Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Right ahead.
I am showing you what I have marked as defense exhibit number 2, which is your police report.
Okay.
Mrs. No, I'm talking about defense exhibit number 2.
Hang on. I'm just having trouble getting that on my screen. Right here. There we go. Sorry.
Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer defense exhibit number 2 into evidence.
Any objection from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, defense exhibit number 2 is admitted.
On the 3rd page, can you please read the orange highlighted section under details of the offense continued?
This time hitting him in the left leg at the thigh area.
Do you agree that this details of the offense states that the bullet fired was at his left leg?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Go right ahead.
I'm showing you what I've marked as defense exhibit number 3, which is the diagram of the body. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes.
Your Honor, I offer defense exhibit number 3 into evidence.
Any objection from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, defense exhibit 3 is admitted.
According to this document, from John Walker Barrett's point of view, which leg was shot?
The right.
Also, Chaney, is there a private door in the back of Mrs. Barrett's home?
According to Leigh Porter, yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
Sustained. Next question.
Referring back to defense exhibit number 2, in the house diagram you created that is attached to the document, could you please point to the private door in the back of Mrs. Barrett's home?
It's not on the diagram
Do you know why?
because it has not been marked. I did not mark it.
Okay. After 9 years of marriage, it is safe to say that Mr. and Barrett knew each other.
Yes.
Referring back to defense exhibit number 2, the first page, could you verify that you recorded this incident as stranger to stranger?
Yes. However,
No
I do
further
not
question.
know, I do not know why it's marked.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Right. Any follow-up questions from the prosecution?
I don't believe in this trial. We're allowed to have.
All right.
Okay.
So you ready to call your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
Our second witness to stand will be Dr. Joe R. May.
All right.
Is Dr. May ready?
Yes.
Please state your full name for the record.
Joe R. May.
What is your occupation?
I'm a practicing medical pathologist.
What does a pathologist do?
A medical pathologist reviews post-mortem causes of death and commits autopsies to deceased.
Do you recognize the name John Walker Barrett?
Yes, the name does sound familiar.
Who performed the medical examination of John Walker Barrett?
I performed the medical examination of John Walker Barrett.
Did you record your findings anywhere?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I would like to bring up Prosecution Exhibit 5 on the screen. Do you recognize, or approach witness?
You can approach.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is the gross description I wrote up for the deceased John Walker Barrett.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes.
Is your signature at the bottom? Is that your signature?
I cannot currently see the bottom of the page. Yes, that is my signature.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Prosecution Exhibit 5, gross description.
All right. Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Prosecution Exhibit number 5 is admitted.
Thank you. When did you write this up, Dr. May?
I wrote this up at approximately 3:30 p.m. December 19, 1988.
How long after finishing examining the body was that?
That was directly after I finished examining the body.
Could you please read the first sentence of the second paragraph of your gross description?
Yes. There was a gunshot wound to the posterior portion of the cranium.
Where is the posterior portion of the cranium?
The posterior portion of the cranium is the area at the back of your head where your neck meets your skull.
Would you please read the following 2 lines?
Yes. A tear of the skin 5 centimeters long extends diagonally across the posterior portion of the cranium. I could not find powder marks.
What does the absence of powder marks mean?
The absence of powder marks means that the muzzle of the firearm used to kill the deceased was fired more than 2 feet away from the deceased.
Could you please read the next paragraph?
Yes. The path of the bullet was from back to front at an angle of approximately 45 degrees from a horizontal plane, slightly from right to left. This is consistent with a bullet fired while the deceased was lying on the floor, face down.
Does the evidence also show that the attacker would be standing slightly to the right behind the body as it lay on the floor when the shot was fired?
Yes.
What was the cause of death for John Walker Barrett?
The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the posterior portion of the cranium.
Could you please read the last 2 sentences of the second paragraph?
Yes. Within the cranial cavity are 2 fragments of bullet. No pre-existing abnormalities are apparent.
What is the importance of the lack of pre-existing abnormalities?
The lack of pre-existing abnormalities means that there was no other cause of death to the deceased besides the bullet to the skull.
Any other bullet wounds on John Walker Barrett?
Yes.
Did you record a diagram of these bullet wounds?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'd like to bring Prosecution Exhibit 6 onto the screen, diagram of the body.
Okay. Go ahead.
Permission to approach witness.
Go ahead.
Do you recognize this, Dr. May?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is a diagram of the body. I wrote it for the deceased John Walker Barrett.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes, this is an exact copy.
Your Honor, I'd like to enter Prosecution Exhibit 6, diagram of the body.
Any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Prosecution Exhibit number 6 is admitted.
Could we please go back to the gross description? Could you please read the next few lines of the paragraph from your gross description discussing the location of the other bullet wounds?
Of course. There are 4 remaining gunshot wounds as follows. 1 gunshot wound to the upper portion of the left arm from front to back through and through. 2 gunshot wounds to the back, slightly from right of the midline, from back to front at an approximate angle of 45 degrees from a horizontal plane. And 1 gunshot wound to the upper portion of the right leg through and through. No powder marks were apparent.
What does the absence of powder marks on these bullets mean?
It means it's the same as the one to the head. The muzzle of the firearm was more than 2 feet away from the deceased while it was fired.
Were the bullets to the back fired from the same position and plane as the one to the head?
Yes.
Are all of, could you please go back to the diagram? Thank you. Are all the bullet wounds accurately recorded on this diagram?
Their approximate location is located on the diagram.
Is there any way to know the exact order of shots fired?
No, there is no exact way to know the order of the shots fired.
Then why are they all labeled on this diagram?
Well, I decided to make a conclusion that was most reasonable, that would be the most likely order of the shots fired to the deceased.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Sustained. Next question.
Based off your observations and conclusions, what was the order of the bullets?
The order of the bullets was that I concluded was that the first bullet was the one to the arm and the second the one to the leg. The 4th and 5th bullets were both to the back and the 6th was the one to the head, killing the deceased.
Why is there no third bullet marked?
Well, there's no third bullet marked because in the scene of the crime, there was a bullet recovered and I thought it reasonable to conclude that that was the 3rd bullet fired to the deceased.
How many shots were fired while Mr. Barrett was facing his attacker?
Only 1.
How many shots were fired while he was not?
The remaining 5 shots were fired while he was not facing his attacker.
So, based off your observations, how did Mr. Barrett die?
Well, from my observations, it seems obvious to conclude that Mr. Barrett died while lying face down on the floor with a gun shot to
Objection.
the back of his head.
Speculation.
Overruled. I'll allow him to answer.
Would you like
If
me
you
to
would,
repeat the question?
could you repeat your answer again, please?
Yes. To me, it seems obvious from my conclusions that John Walker Barrett, the deceased, died while he was lying face down on the floor with a gunshot to his head.
That's all. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Does the defense wish to cross-examine this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go right ahead.
In which order were the bullets fired at Mr. Barrett?
I do not know the exact order of the bullets fired.
Why not?
There is no way to possibly and exactly conclude the way of the bullets fired because there is no evidence.
Referring back to prosecution exhibit number 6, can you please... One sec. Sorry. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Right ahead.
I'm showing you what I've marked as defense exhibit number 4. Do you recognize it, this document?
Yes, I do.
Can you please read the bottom highlighted section?
Yes. It is not possible to determine in which order the shots were fired.
So the shots could have been fired in the exact opposite order of the order that you assumed?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Does the prosecution have another witness?
Yes, we have one final witness, Your Honor. Ms. Leigh Porter.
All right. You may proceed.
Please state your full name for the record.
My name is Leigh Porter. I'm 48 years old.
What is your occupation?
I've worked all my life as a housekeeper.
Who was your current employer on December 18th, 1988?
Mr. and Mrs. Barrett.
How long had you worked for them?
I had worked for them for 6 months up until the point of the shooting.
What was your weekly schedule?
My schedule was 2 in the afternoon to 10 o'clock at night, 5 days a week, Wednesday through Sunday.
What class neighborhood would you say the Barretts lived in?
The Barretts were very wealthy. Their neighborhood and home was gorgeous.
Your Honor, I would like to pull up prosecution's exhibit number 2. Is this size of the Barrett's house on this diagram accurate?
Yes.
Is this an accurate layout of the Barrett's house?
Yes.
About how far would someone be if they were sitting on sofa number 1 from someone coming out of the dining room and into the living room?
If I had to guess, I would say about 40 feet.
Did the Barretts have a gun cabinet in the living room?
No.
What about a safe?
No.
Were you at the Barrett's house on December 18th, 1988?
Yes.
How many people were at the Barrett's house that night?
Just me, Mr. and Mrs. Barrett, and their kids were off at school.
Did you later give a statement?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to pull up prosecution's exhibit number 7, Leigh Porter's statement.
All right, go right ahead.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Porter, do you recognize this statement?
Yes.
Can you identify what it is?
Yes. It's my witness statement.
Is that your signature at the bottom?
Yes.
Could you please read the first line on the second paragraph?
Yes. I don't like to mess with other people's business, but ever since I came to work for the Barretts, I knew something was not right.
Were you specifically looking for something out of the ordinary?
No.
But it was so obvious you still noticed something?
Yes.
What do you mean by knew something wasn't right?
Well, Mrs. Barrett and Mr. Barrett would always have these little arguments. Nothing that was ever drastic, but their relationship didn't seem stable.
What was Mrs. Barrett like in the few weeks leading up to the shooting?
She had been almost anxious, very upset, and would cry often.
What was Mr. Barrett like in the house?
He was normal, pretty nice to me.
How did he treat you?
He treated me just like anybody else, which as a housekeeper, I deeply value. He treated me like I was a member of his family.
What was his attitude towards Mrs. Barrett's kids?
Although those kids weren't his own, he loved them like they were his own. I'm glad they were away during this time.
What was his attitude towards Mrs. Barrett herself?
Nothing ever particularly drastic. Sometimes he would get in small arguments with her, or maybe raise his voice just a tad, but nothing too horrible, ever.
Did you ever see him be verbally abusive to Mrs. Barrett?
No.
What was the worst argument you ever saw?
Well, once, and this only happened once, I was downstairs in the dining room, and I heard them arguing upstairs, and then I heard Mrs. Barrett scream. Nothing like that has ever happened before, other than the once.
And the entire time you worked for the Barretts, did you ever see Mr. Barrett be physically abusive to Mrs. Barrett?
No.
Never? Not one time?
No.
Did you ever see him threaten Mrs. Barrett?
No.
How about any signs of physical abusiveness, like bruises? Did you see any on Mrs. Barrett?
Absolutely not.
When did Mr. Barrett normally get home from work?
I would say normally around 9 o'clock, 9:30.
What time did he come home on the night of the shooting, December 18th, 1988?
He came home around 9 o'clock, which was pretty good for him.
Did Mr. Barrett ever drink?
Yes, but not often.
Had he been drinking when he got home that night, the night of the shooting?
No. Anything that he would have done that night was a completely sober decision.
Did Mr. Barrett ever have a temper?
Yes, not to where it was dangerous, and not to me.
After he did have a small temper, what did he do?
It would often result in him apologizing profusely.
What was Mrs. Barrett like on December 18th, 1988, before Mr. Barrett got home?
She had been crying out of what seemed like frustration, and she had seemed nervous and was pacing up and down the entrance of the home.
Was there any bruises on her that night?
No.
What did Mr. Barrett do when he first got home?
He went to the living room and took off his coat.
What did Mrs. Barrett do when Mr. Barrett went into the living room?
She followed him into the room.
What was he acting like?
Normal.
Did Mrs. Barrett seem intent on talking to him?
Yes, slightly.
What did they do in the living room?
They talked and they argued here and there.
Did you tell them dinner was ready?
Yes.
What did they do?
Both looking mad and upset, they went to the dining room.
Did they talk during dinner?
Not much.
Did you hear what they said?
Yes.
Could you please read the sentence from your statement in the fourth paragraph about Mr. Barrett said at dinner?
Yes. Mr. Barrett said something like, "I've had it with you, Barbara. Now you know I'm leaving tonight."
How did Mrs. Barrett act during dinner?
She was upset and crying.
Did Mrs. Barrett say anything in response to what Mr. Barrett said?
Yes.
Could you please read that quote from your statement?
She said something like, "You can't do this to me."
How was Mr. Barrett acting during dinner?
Mr. Barrett was very calm, much calmer than Mrs. Barrett.
Did Mr. Barrett ask Mrs. Barrett to leave the dining room?
After a few minutes, yes.
Did she go?
Yes, she went to the living room.
Did she say anything before she left?
Yes, as I was starting to clear the table.
What did she say?
She said something like, "You'll be sorry."
Did Mr. Barrett seem particularly angry?
No, not at all.
Did Mrs. Barrett seem particularly angry?
Yes.
What happened right after that?
She walked into the kitchen. And the next thing I knew, I heard 3 loud noises really close together.
About how long is, quote, the next thing I knew?
Just a few minutes.
What did those 3 loud noises sound like?
They sounded like a car backfiring.
What exactly would you explain a car backfiring sounds like?
Well, I know this might be a weird thing to relate it to, but it almost sounded like a cannon, or an easier way to describe it, a loud bang.
What did you do?
I went into the dining room.
What did you see?
And the next thing I knew, I saw Mr. Barrett limping into the dining room.
Where was Barbara?
She had come running into the dining room.
Was there a specific spot the blood was located on Mr. Barrett?
I could see his arm was bloody. So was his leg.
What did he look like?
He was terrified.
Was he carrying anything?
He was carrying a blood-soaked letter.
Did he have any weapons on him?
No.
Did you see anyone else?
No.
Were you scared for your own safety?
Yes, I was terrified. She was carrying a gun around the house.
Was it a large gun?
Yes.
Where did you go after you saw Mrs. Barrett chase him around the corner?
Could you repeat the question?
Where did you go after you saw Mrs. Barrett chase him around the corner?
I ran out to the backyard.
Did you ever come back inside?
I didn't do anything until about 10 minutes later.
Where was Mrs. Barrett?
She had locked herself in the downstairs bathroom. I heard her crying.
What was she doing? Oh, sorry. What was she saying?
She kept screaming that she didn't mean to hurt him.
So in what she was saying, she admitted that she had hurt him?
Yes.
How long was it until the police arrived?
About 10 minutes.
Was there anything suspicious you heard early in the day on December 18th, 1988?
Oh, what I told you is all I remember, except for one thing. The day of the shooting, I heard some noises coming from the backyard.
What did they sound like?
The same noises I heard tonight, like a car backfiring.
Who did you see after you heard those noises?
Mrs. Barrett.
Did she just walk in through a door?
No. She had come in through a secret private door in the house that nobody has ever used, especially her.
Was she carrying anything in her hands?
A gun.
Was it the same gun she had later?
Now, I'm no expert. I could be wrong, but it looked like the same gun.
How long did you say she was out there?
For a while.
So let me get this straight. On the day of the shooting, you heard the sound of a car backfiring twice. One earlier that day coming from the backyard, and the second time right after dinner from the living room. Correct?
Yes.
One last thing. Have you ever been in trouble with the law?
No. Well, yes. I've hardly ever been in trouble with the law. Once I got arrested back in 1979 because some woman I worked for accused me of stealing $100 from her purse. I never did, though.
What happened?
The judge put me on probation, and that was that.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Does the defense have questions for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go right ahead.
Do you agree that your 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. from Wednesday to Sunday work week is only 40 hours a week?
Yes.
Do you have any knowledge of what happened at the Barrett's home during the 120 hours you were not at their house?
No.
You don't like to mess with other people's business, right?
No, not at all.
When Mrs. Barrett was bruised and battered, you didn't see bruises because it wasn't your business to look for them, correct?
Yes.
Plus, a bruise forming Sunday night would have faded before 2 p.m. on Wednesday, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Sustained. Next question.
Mrs. Porter, you were certain that things were not right between the Barretts, right?
Yes.
Mrs. Barrett cried often, didn't she?
Yes.
You even heard her screaming when she was alone with Mr. Barrett, right?
Yes.
And you saw firsthand that Mr. Barrett had a bad temper, didn't he?
Yes.
Mr. Barrett even threw a fork at you, right?
Yes, but things like that happen all the time to me. He's by far been one of the kindest people I've ever worked for.
That was shocking, right?
A little.
Mrs. Porter, you were aware that there was a gun in the Barrett house, correct?
I guess.
There was another housekeeper as well, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Barrett had a mistress too, correct?
Yes.
All of you had access to the house, didn't you?
Yes.
Since a day at a desk job lasts from about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Mr. Barrett came home around 9, he was about 4 hours late, right?
Yes, I suppose.
So wouldn't Mrs. Barrett have been worried about John if he was 4 hours late?
Yeah, I guess. I don't blame her.
On the night that Mr. Barrett died, he came home late, right?
Yes.
When he told her he was leaving, Mrs. Barrett became upset and cried, right?
Yes.
Mr. Barrett commanded her to leave the room, right?
Not as much of a command, more than it was strongly suggested.
Once Mr. Barrett finished eating, he went into the living room, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Go ahead.
I'm showing you what I've marked as defense exhibit number 1, your witness statement. Do you recognize this document? Do you recognize this document? You're muted.
Yes.
Is it an exact copy?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I offer defense exhibit number 1 to evidence.
All right, any objection from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
Defense exhibit number 1 is admitted.
Can you please read the top pink highlighted section starting with the next thing I knew?
The next thing I knew, I heard 3 loud noises real close together. They sounded like a car backfiring. I went into the dining room to see what had happened, and I saw Mr. Barrett limping into the dining room with a piece of paper in his hand. It was bloody. I could see his arm was bloody, and so was his leg. He looked real scared.
That's it. Since you heard sounds exactly like a car backfiring, then you heard a car backfiring, right?
Well, no. I said it sounded similar too.
You did not personally witness someone shoot a gun that night, right?
No.
After you saw Mr. Barrett limping into the dining room, you saw someone running into the dining room with a gun, correct?
Yes.
Just like you responded to the sound, Mrs. Barrett was responding to the sound as well, wasn't she?
I suppose so.
As far as you know, it's completely plausible that she heard the sound, grabbed her gun, and ran to protect John, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Overruled. You can answer.
Repeat question, please.
As far as you know, it's completely plausible that she heard the sound, grabbed her gun, and ran to protect John, right?
Maybe, I guess.
After you ran out of the house, you re-entered the Barrett house 10 minutes later, right?
Yes.
You were gone the whole time, right?
Yes.
The police hadn't arrived, right?
Yes.
From the time you left the house until the time the police arrived, anyone could have tampered with the evidence, right?
Sure.
There was plenty of time for an intruder or the other housekeeper to tamper with evidence before you returned, correct?
Yes.
I'd like to refer back to defense exhibit number 1. Can you read the second pink highlighted section starting with "That's all I know"?
Yes. And that's all I know, except for one thing that I just remembered. The day of the shooting, I heard some noises just like the car backfiring coming from the backyard.
Okay. So either you heard a car backfiring or you had no idea what was the sound because you weren't there to see what made the sound, correct?
Yes.
Then Mrs. Barrett entered the house through a private door she never uses?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Go right ahead.
I'm showing you what I've marked as defense exhibit number 2, Officer Chaney's police report with the attached diagram. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Tell me again, what is this document?
The police statement.
Is it an exact copy of the original?
Yes.
Okay. On the diagram of the house, could you please point out to the private door that Mrs. Barrett entered the house through after a car backfired?
It's not on the diagram. There was no need to put it on there.
Why not?
Because nobody else knew except for me.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Any other witnesses from the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Do you rest? Are y'all done? You're done calling witnesses, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Is the defense ready to call their first witness?
No, it's not there.
Yes.
All right. I haven't heard the defense say they're ready to call a witness yet.
He said yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead and call your first witness.
I'd like to call Dana McGuire to the witness stand.
All right.
What is your name and credentials?
My name is Dana McGuire. I am a practicing psychologist. My area of specialty is in dealing with abused and battered women. I received my BA from Campbell State University in Haddonfield, South Carolina, where I graduated with highest honors. I also received my master's degree in psychology, where my emphasis was on the sociological and psychological dysfunction within the family structure. I was also instrumental in developing the Family Crisis Intervention Training Program for the Haddonfield Police Department, which is now being instituted in police departments across the country. Over the past 17 years of my practice, I have interviewed and collected data on well over 300 battered and abused women, and I have taken over 500 stories from such women.
Have you appeared in court before?
Yes, I have testified in several trials, both civil and criminal, concerning abused and battered women. On several occasions, I have been appointed by the court to act as an expert witness.
Why are you paid at such a high amount?
Because I am an expert.
What is your definition of a battered woman?
I define a battered woman as one who is subject to any forceful physical or psychological behavior by a man against her will. To be defined as a battering couple, the couple must go through at least 2 battering cycles, which can be divided into 3 phases.
Can you explain the first phase of the battering cycle?
The first phase of the battering cycle is a time where tensions mount and there are minor battering instances, such as verbal abuse and minor physical violence. During this time, the man's anger increases because of his guilt and his inability to control his actions, while the battered woman's anger increases as well, though she generally attempts to hide it as to prevent tensions from mounting.
Can you explain the second phase of the battering cycle?
The second phase is the acute battering phase. This phase can last anywhere from a couple hours to days. During this time, the man unleashes an uncontrollable amount of tension, which results in major physical and psychological destructiveness. It is impossible for anyone to know when this phase will occur.
Can you explain the third phase of the battering cycle?
The third phase is one of extreme kindness and loving behavior on the part of the man. His actions are usually an attempt to atone for his previously violent behavior. Underneath, the battering man secretly believes that he has taught the woman a lesson and that truly he will have no need to batter in the future. This cycle can be repeated over and over again until the couple either separates or kills one another.
Where is the payoff for both parties?
The payoff for both parties is during the third phase of the cycle. The man feels as though he's been forgiven and his tension is released, and the woman believes that the beatings are truly her fault and that if she could correct her behavior, then her life would be perfect. Most couples are extremely loving during this phase, much like they were on the honeymoon of the marriage.
Can any person predict when the acute battering phase will occur?
No one can accurately predict when the acute battering phase will occur.
Why would a woman stay in the relationship with her husband if she's constantly being battered?
Her psychological dependency on the man is enormous. Often, battered women have very low self-esteem, as does the man to whom they are attached to. Some have no economic or legal choice. All battered women stay in such relationships because they have internalized what I like to call the theory of learned helplessness.
What is learned helplessness?
The theory of learned helplessness was first discovered by a man named Dr. Samuel Michaels in his studies on first response reinforcements. He and his assistants placed dogs in cages and administered random electrical shocks at varied intervals. It soon became apparent to the dogs that there was nothing they could do to escape these shocks. At first, they tried to escape through voluntary movement, but after that failed, they became passive and ceased any voluntary activities. They even refused an attempt to escape when the cage doors were left open and they were dragged through the opening. This experiment has been done on several different types of animals, all with the same results.
What does this experiment have to do with any of this?
This experiment demonstrates that when a battered woman believes she cannot control what occurs, she seeks refuge in extreme passivity. Repeated beatings decrease that woman's motivation to respond. Her passivity is reinforced each turn during the loving phase of the cycle, which she views as being the true state of her relationship, the beatings being mere aberrations.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Go right ahead.
I'm showing you what I've marked as defense exhibit number 5. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
What is this document?
This document is Barbara Allen Barrett's witness statement.
Is it an exact copy?
Yes.
I offer defense exhibit number 5 into evidence.
Any objection from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
Our defense exhibit number 5 is admitted.
Can you please read the top green highlighted section starting with about 2 weeks?
About 2 weeks before our wedding, after all the invitations had been sent and preparations made, John came over to my house after work. I could tell he had been drinking. He had a wild look in his eyes. I did not know it at the time, but later I found out that he had just lost an important case at trial. My cook had prepared a wonderful dinner and we were ready to eat. He said he didn't want to eat and asked me to fix him a chivas with water. I fixed him a weak drink on purpose, hoping to avert a scene.
When he tasted it, he immediately threw it against the wall. There was broken glass everywhere. He started yelling that I was incompetent, stupid, and condescending. I tried to defend myself, but it just made him madder. Finally, he shoved me against the wall with a great deal of force and slapped me in the face. Then he started crying. So did I. We were both very surprised that this had occurred. There was no real harm done, and I saw at that point how much he really needed me. As quickly as he had gotten mad, he became the loving, compassionate person I knew and adored. He swore he would never touch me with violence again. I believed him, and we went ahead with our wedding.
Can you please read the second green highlighted section starting with John was very handsome?
John was, question calls for a narrative answer.
Rule, this exhibit's already been admitted into evidence, so I will go ahead and allow it. Go ahead.
John was very handsome, and I always worried about his attraction to other women. One time when we had only been married about 8 months, he phoned to say he was going to be late. I became concerned around 12 a.m. when he had not come home. I put on my coat and drove down to his office where I saw the light was on. When I opened the door to his office, I saw 2 people on the couch, one of whom was John. The other person was blonde. I did not recognize her. I ran out of the office as fast as I could and returned home. 2 hours later, John came home and was furious. He accused me of spying on him and humiliating him. He said if I were a real wife, he wouldn't be forced to spend time with other women. His face was red and contorted, and I could see he intended to beat me again. I started running for the door, but he caught me and began hitting me with his fists in my face. When I fell down, he started kicking me. The next thing I knew, he had left and I was being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I told everyone at the hospital that I had fallen down some stairs. The next day, John filled my room with flowers and phoned me every hour. At night, he spent hours sitting by my bed reading poetry. He begged me to take him back and promised there would be no more violence or other women in his life.
Does what you just read match the battering cycle?
Completely.
How does this all apply to Mrs. Barrett?
When I met with Mrs. Barrett, I could tell she was a classic case of a battered wife who had been abused by her husband, John Barrett, for years and years. But still, given her extreme dependency, she could no more have broken free from her husband than she could have severed her right arm. The very short periods in time during which her husband was loving and contrite were enough to see her through the battering phases. She basically lived from one loving cycle to one loving phase to another, while still trying to deal with her husband's cruelty and her own passivity.
Why would Mrs. Barrett say she didn't mean to hurt John?
Mrs. Barrett thought she was hurting John by not spending enough time with him, and that was why he wanted to leave her.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Staying. Next question.
What would be some reasons Mrs. Barrett couldn't remember who killed John?
First, Mrs. Barrett was drinking, causing memory loss. Second, battered women often experience major mental issues, which include breakdowns. Mrs. Barrett had just been told that her husband, whom she loved very much, wanted a divorce. She was very upset, and as a result of that, she experienced a breakdown that would cause her to forget anything until after she had recovered.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Does the prosecution have any questions of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
Ms. McGuire, you told us earlier about the women you interviewed and the numbers were very impressive, but were any of them conducted under a controlled database?
No.
Not one?
No.
And you said many of the stories were just fragments of stories that you listened to. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you never actually met those women, right?
I did meet with several battered women.
Why did you only listen to fragments of their stories? Wouldn't you want to listen to the whole story?
I listened to many of their stories and took notes on fragments of them.
So you don't even know if these stories are real, do you? Because you only listen to fragments?
I do believe that they are very real.
Ms. McGuire, how long had you known Mrs. Barrett when she shot her husband?
I did not know Mrs. Barrett.
Oh, you hadn't? Well, when did you meet her?
I met her 2 weeks after the shooting.
So you never knew Barbara during any of the battering cycles?
No.
So what you know of them is only what she told you?
Yes.
And everything she told you was recalling things that happened weeks, months, or even years ago?
Yes.
You didn't get an opportunity to talk to Mr. Barrett, did you?
No.
So you never heard his side of the story?
No.
Were any of your interviews with her done from a controlled database?
No, they were not.
You said you would call Barbara Barrett a classic battered woman, but there's no way with a scientific certainty for you to conclude this, correct?
No.
So the conclusions that you reached concerning Mrs. Barrett were not reached scientifically either?
No, but I am an expert who has spent several years learning to be a psychologist.
In any of your interviews, did Mrs. Barrett ever mention that Mr. Barrett was having an affair?
No.
Did she ever mention about how she believed she caught him at his office having an affair?
No.
Did she ever mention how she was worried about her husband's attraction to other women?
No.
Did she ever mention how she found a letter Mr. Barrett had written to his paramour?
No.
Did she ever mention how when Mr. Barrett was clutching this letter, now covered in blood, in his hand when he died?
No.
Had you had this information, wouldn't this alter your opinion on Mrs. Barrett?
No, it would not.
Why wouldn't it?
She was a severely battered woman, and the accusations against her are very false.
But aren't these things that she didn't mention to you big facts that would play in to how you say that she's battered?
Possibly.
Earlier, you explained the theory of learned helplessness. So what was the experiment originally performed on?
It was performed on dogs.
And you said that after that, it had the same results on other animals, right?
Yes.
So what results did you get when it was tested on humans?
It was not tested on humans because that would be severely inhumane.
Did you change the experiment so it was able to be performed on humans?
No, but I do feel that the experiment is very consistent with what I've seen in battered women.
But there's still a chance that humans wouldn't replicate the same response because it was never tested on them, right?
Well, what I've seen is consistent.
But there's still a chance that it could not be.
Yes.
And that is why it is just a theory and not a fact, right?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire, do you have a PhD?
Yes.
Do you have a doctorate?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to something else. Let's suppose all of what you know is true and accurate and look at the case of Mrs. Barrett. Ms. McGuire, is it accurate that the first phase, the one of building tension, which lasts for weeks to months, is the longest?
Yes.
Is it also true that the third one, the one of love and contrite behavior, is the shortest?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire, you never say in your statement how long the third phase is. Do you know, or is it just reasonable that this one is different for each couple?
It is different for each couple, but they are considerably shorter than the first phase.
The battering phases follow patterns, right?
Yes.
And Mrs. Barrett said that hers do, correct?
Yes.
So you said that the loving phase for the Barretts continued to grow shorter and shorter. Is that true?
No.
It's not true?
No.
If they continued to grow shorter and shorter, would you agree that the worst battering phase Mrs. Barrett went through was the one only 5 days before the murder where she claims her husband was trying to kill her?
Yes.
And although that sounds very bad, it was only that one afternoon when it happened. So the worst the battering phase was for the Barretts was only a matter of hours, correct?
Yes.
But Mrs. Barrett then claims that the night her husband came after her with the belt, ready to choke her. Is that what she told you?
Yes, it is.
But there are always phases 3 and 1 again before the second one, the one of physical and physiological destructiveness, right?
Yes, but it is almost impossible to accurately predict when the acute battering phase will occur.
Ms. McGuire, could you, Your Honor, I would like to bring up prosecution's exhibit number 8.
Right.
May I approach the witness?
Go ahead.
Do you recognize this?
Yes,
Can you identify what it is?
it is my witness statement.
Could you please read the sentence in the 7th paragraph, starting with the battering cycles is usually?
Where's that?
The last paragraph on this page, starting with this battering cycle is usually?
This battering cycle is usually repeated over and over again until the couple either kills one another or separates.
Thank you. And you got to interview Mrs. Barrett a number of times, right?
Yes,
And you said that she was a classic case of a battered woman, correct?
yes,
And that she showed all the right signs and such?
yes.
Could you please read the 3rd sentence on the last page of your statement, please?
Where's that?
On the last page.
Oh,
The 3rd sentence.
she can no more have controlled her actions on that night than she could have controlled the rising of the sun in the morning.
So Mrs. Barrett did have actions that night.
Yes,
Ms. McGuire, how much do you get paid for a consultation?
$75,
How much do you get paid for appearing in court?
$150.
So you were paid for a testimony here today?
Yes, I was.
One last question. Do you have a doctorate?
Yes,
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
What was the objection?
Facts not in evidence. She says nowhere in her statement that she has a PhD or doctorate.
Overruled. She can answer on her personal knowledge. You can answer.
yes, I do.
And do you have a PhD?
Yes,
Then why did you answer you didn't have one earlier?
I didn't.
Yes. I asked you in the beginning and you said you did not, and you said you did have a PhD and doctorate. Oh, wait. Okay, sorry. Never mind. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Does the defense have any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Call your next witness.
I'm calling Barbara Allen Barrett up to the stand.
All right.
What is your name and where do you live?
My name is Barbara Allen Barrett. I live at 437 Rambling Woods Drive, Haddonfield, South Carolina. I've lived since 1964.
Who is John Barrett?
He is my husband.
When and where did you meet him?
I met him in 1978 at an alumni function for Vassar. His sister Hildy had introduced us.
What was your initial impression of him?
I was fascinated by his manners and came to John. I had never met someone as charismatic as John.
What happened at the alumni function?
After the introductions were made, we talked for an hour or so. Then we went outside to get some fresh air.
Were you drinking?
Yes, I remember we both had too much champagne.
What happened next?
Suddenly, John pushed me down into the flower bed and started getting fresh. He had this wild look in his eyes. Somehow, I managed to get up, leave the party, and return home without making a scene.
What happened that evening?
That evening, he wrote for the class to apologize and flooded my house with flowers. 2 days later, I had agreed to see him. After that, we began dating, and we saw each other every day for 6 months.
What was your impression of him then?
During that time, he was a perfect gentleman and a wonderful companion most of the time.
Have you been subject to any forceful or psychological behavior by John Walker Barrett against your will?
Yes.
And you agree that you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Would you please describe sometimes John would batter you?
About 2 weeks before our wedding, John came over to my house. I could tell he had been drinking. My cook had made a wonderful dinner and we were ready to eat. He said he didn't want to eat, and he asked me to fix him a chavas with water. I fixed the drink weak on purpose.
Why did you do that?
I was hoping to avoid a scene.
What happened next?
When he tasted it, he immediately threw it against the wall. There was glass everywhere. He started yelling at me, saying that I was condescending, incompetent, and stupid. I tried to defend myself, but it seemed to have just made him madder. Finally, he shoved me up against the wall with a great deal of force and slapped me across the face.
What was your reaction?
He started to cry, and so did I. We were both very surprised that this had occurred. As quickly as he had gotten mad, he became the loving, compassionate person I knew. He swore he would never touch me with violence ever again. I believed him, and we went on with the wedding.
What else can you remember?
Well, another time, we had only been married for a few months when he phoned to say that he was going to be late that night. I became concerned at about 12 a.m. when he had not come home.
What did you do?
I put on my coat and I drove down to the office where I saw that his light was on. When I opened the door, I saw 2 people on the couch, one of whom was John. The other person was a blonde, but I didn't recognize her.
What did you do then?
I ran out of the office as fast as I could and returned home. 2 hours later, John came home and he was furious. He started accusing me of spying on him and humiliating him. He said that if I was a real wife, he wouldn't have been forced to spend time with other women. His face was all red and contorted, and I could tell that he intended to beat me again.
Did you retaliate?
No. I started running for the door, but he caught me and he started beating me with his fist on my face. I fell down, but then he started kicking me.
What else do you remember?
The next thing I remember is that John was gone and I was being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I told everyone at the hospital that I had just fallen down some stairs.
Why did you say that?
Because I didn't want to let people know that I was being beaten by my husband.
What happened after that?
The following day, John phoned me every hour and he filled my room with flowers. At night, he would sit by my bed and read poetry. He begged me to take him back and promised that there would be no more beatings and no more women in his life.
What were your feelings about John at this time?
I think by this time I would have died if I had to live without him. I agreed to take him back, and for several weeks he was the most wonderful husband I could have ever hoped for.
What happened 3 weeks before John's death?
He came to me and said that he got under trouble. I knew he had been spending long hours at work and that I had not been giving him the attention that he was used to getting.
What did you tell him?
I told him that I'd give up my activities for the symphony so that we could try again. I thought he had agreed because things seemed less tense for a few days.
What happened 1 week before John's death?
About 1 week before John's death, John seemed very edgy and tense. He grew sloppy in his personal habits, and Leigh was always having to pick up after him. He was drinking a lot more, and he started to become verbally abusive again. I knew this was the beginning of another violent cycle.
What happened 2 days later?
2 days later, he came home drunk. He took off his belt when we were in the bedroom, and he started to beat me with it. I knew he was trying to kill me, but I didn't believe I'd actually die.
What happened on the night of John's death?
On the night of John's death, John came home around 9. He was sober for a change. We sat in the living room, and I told him how unhappy I was that he was constantly coming home so late.
What did he say to this?
He said that it was none of my business and that he wanted a divorce.
How did you feel?
I was deeply hurt and shocked. I told him that I didn't believe him because of everything that we'd been through together. I asked him to think it over because I really couldn't live without him.
What did he say to this?
He told me that he was leaving me for another woman. We were both upset.
What happened then?
We went into dinner to argue. I remember him saying that he was leaving that night. I guess I was crying a great deal because he told me to leave the room.
What did you do next?
I went into the living room and poured myself a glass of wine to help me think. As I was drinking it, John came in. I think he was drinking scotch, but I remember being very afraid of him.
What happened next?
I don't remember anything after that until things came away. But I know that I would never have hurt John.
Have you ever experienced these breakdowns before?
Many times.
What type of emotions were you feeling during your questioning?
I was so confused, tired, and upset. I just wanted to go home. I still couldn't believe that John was dead and gone. We had been through so much together, and I loved him so much.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, does the prosecution have questions for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go right ahead.
Ms. Barrett, you said that these beatings ran in cycles over the years. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And that he would often beat you with his belt, like you're afraid he was going to on the night of December 18th, 1988?
Yes.
But Mrs. Barrett, you've never snapped before when he's taken off his belt, have you?
No.
You have never had any other evenings you can't remember?
Not that I can remember, no.
I would like to bring up Prosecution Exhibit 9, Mrs. Barrett's statement. Or no, I'm sorry, not 9, 4, her confession.
All right, go ahead.
No, wait, yes, the statement, I'm sorry. I can't, can everyone else see it? Oh, there we go. Okay. Permission to approach witness.
Go ahead.
Oh, wait. Which one's pulled up right now? Because my screen's frozen.
The statement of Barbara Allen Barrett, taken at 56 Deauville Street, Haddonfield, South Carolina.
I think that's her confession. I want her
Confession with officer's warnings.
the statement. Please. Her statement, Prosecution Exhibit 9. I'm sorry, I got mixed up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
Oh, I just got mixed up on which evidence it was. I'm sorry. Permission to approach witness.
Go ahead.
Do you recognize this, Mrs. Barrett?
Yes.
What is it?
It is my statement.
Is this an exact copy?
Yes.
I don't know if you can see the signature. Could you go to the page with the signature on it?
Hang on just a second. Let me find the other page. I think it got moved. Sorry. Just a second. There it is. There?
Yes. Is that your signature, Mrs. Barrett?
Yes, it is.
I would like to enter Prosecution Exhibit 9, witness statement of Barbara Allen Barrett. If you would stay on that page of it, please.
You want to stay on this page?
Yeah. I said I'd like
Okay.
to enter the Prosecution Exhibit 9.
Are you offering it at this time?
Yeah.
All right, any objection from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the prosecution exhibit 9 is admitted.
Thank you. Could you scroll up a little bit, please? Could you please read the part from your statement, the last sentence in the 5th paragraph, I believe it is? Yes, 5th paragraph.
Where is it?
The last sentence. It's not highlighted.
Here.
No, after that. Start. There is that a sentence? But yeah, I knew he was down.
I knew he was trying to kill me, but I didn't believe that I would actually die.
So you didn't even snap or not remember an evening when Mr. Barrett beat you to the point where you knew he was trying to kill you, to the point of death?
Well, that time that I knew he was trying to kill me.
You know what I'm saying? You didn't even snap on that evening or have moments you couldn't remember?
No, I did not.
Mrs. Barrett, you said you went to see many people about these beatings. Is that accurate?
Yes.
You first went to your minister and then to many doctors, correct?
Yes.
Yet you don't have any record of these doctor's appointments, do you?
No.
You don't have any. So do you have anything that documents the abusiveness of your husband from the time it was actually taking place?
No, but only because I didn't want people to know.
And Mrs. Barrett, would you consider the fact that your husband beat you a pretty important fact in a case?
Yes.
I would like to bring back up Prosecution Exhibit 4, Barbara Barrett's confession.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Barrett, you never mentioned these beatings to Officer Chaney at the scene of the crime, did you?
No.
And you never mentioned them on this confession either, did you?
No.
But now, Mrs. Barrett, you say that they happened, correct?
Yes.
And you say this in your statement, the second statement that you gave.
Yes.
So you didn't mention anything about this important fact in your confession. You only mentioned it in your statement after meeting with a psychologist who specializes in that field.
Yes.
And you're a pretty jealous wife, aren't you, Mrs. Barrett?
I mean, my husband was having an affair.
Did you ever check up on your husband?
No.
Would you please go back to Mrs. Barrett's statement?
Go ahead.
Exhibit 9, the first page of it, please. You have it up. If you could please read the second, or no, wait, the third sentence in the last paragraph. And then the one following it.
I became concerned at about 12 a.m. when he had not come home. I put on my coat and I drove down to his office where I saw that his light was on.
So you did check up on your husband then, Mrs. Barrett?
Yes.
Okay. And you said you saw him in his office sitting next to another woman on a couch, correct?
Yes.
But they were just sitting on the couch?
I mean, yeah.
And there was no physical contact?
I mean, when you see your husband with another woman, you can't really look at something like that. So, of course, I guess.
But your husband, he never denied that it was just one of his clients, did he?
No, he didn't.
So, for all you know, it could have just been another woman, one who was, for instance, one he was working for, one of his clients, who was in there sitting on the couch next to him as they discussed the contents of her case.
Why on earth would a client, especially a woman, be in his office that late alone with him?
But he never denied it.
No, he didn't. I still don't understand why that would be a fact.
And you told us about what happened the one night at the party when you and Mr. Barrett were both drunk, weren't you? And did he contact you after that night?
He did.
And you said he apologized many times, right?
Yes.
That he sent you many flowers?
Yes.
And you said that after that night, you saw Mr. Barrett every day for 6 months.
That is correct.
And during this entire time, you said he was a perfect gentleman?
Yes.
Mr. Barrett took pretty well to the fact that you already had kids when you got married, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He loved those kids quite a bit, like they were his own.
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Barrett, who was at the house the night of the shooting?
Myself, John, and Leigh.
And Mrs. Barrett, before your husband got home on the night of the shooting, you were quite anxious, weren't you?
Yes.
You were pacing up and down the halls?
Yes.
And you were angry and frustrated that you kept home later and later, weren't you?
I was, yes.
And when he got home, you followed him into the living room, didn't you?
That is correct.
And you argued with him about the fact that he wanted a divorce?
Well, yes.
And you knew why your husband was leaving you, right?
I did.
So after after arguing about this divorce, you both went into the dining room?
That is correct.
And you continued to talk about this letter that he had and about the divorce, didn't you?
Yes.
And Mr. Barrett, because you were so upset, he told you to leave the dining room, didn't he?
He did.
And you went straight into the living room, right?
That is correct.
You didn't go into any other room of the house before you went into the living room?
No.
And after a minute, he joined you in the living room with a glass of scotch, didn't he?
Yes.
Do you remember so after he came into the living room, you continued to talk about the divorce, correct?
That is correct.
And after this, you said you don't remember anything else about that evening?
Yeah, I don't.
Well, you do remember Officer Chaney taking your statement, don't you?
Vaguely.
So you do still remember it some though, right?
Yes.
So you were mostly in your right mind at that point, weren't you?
Yeah, but it was very little.
Mrs. Barrett, do you typically read things before you sign them?
Yes.
And you said that Officer Chaney never read your Miranda warnings before you gave and signed your confession. Is that right?
Yeah, but it was only because it was right after.
I would like to bring the confession back into evidence, please. Prosecution Exhibit 4.
All right, go ahead.
Mrs. Barrett, could you please read the top line? Or the top paragraph, excuse me.
I, Barbara Allen Barrett, have been warned by Sam Chaney, the person to whom this statement is made, that 1, I have the right to have a lawyer present to advise me both prior to and during any questioning. 2, if unable to employ a lawyer, I have the right to have a lawyer appointed to the counsel with me both prior to and during any questioning. 3, I have the right to remain silent and not make any statement at all, and any statement I make may and probably will be used in evidence against me at my trial. And 4, I have the right to terminate the interview at any time I so desire.
Do you know what these are, Mrs. Barrett?
The Miranda rights.
And what does the following line say?
I fully understand all of these rights, and desiring to waive all of them, I hereby make the following voluntary statement.
Okay, and Mrs. Barrett, what did you say your husband's job was?
He was a lawyer. It's a lawyer, actually.
He was a defense lawyer, you said?
Yes.
And you said he told you all about his cases, correct?
Yes.
So he would have told you all the ways to defend someone, correct?
That is correct.
So he would have told you all the ways to, in theory, defend yourself in a case after shooting someone?
I guess so.
That's all. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Any other witnesses from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
So do you rest?
Yes.
All right. Closing from the prosecution.
Yes.
We have a closing statement made.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court, the evidence put before you today throughout this trial has shown that Barbara Allen Barrett is guilty of murdering her husband, John Walker Barrett, beyond a reasonable doubt. Here in South Carolina, murder is defined as the killing of another person with malice aforethought, either expressed or implied. The defense would like you to think that Mrs. Barrett is not guilty of killing her husband. However, this is not logical at all. Let me remind you of the evidence we have shown you today that proves that there was more than enough evidence to support that case. Firstly, Mrs. Porter testified that earlier in the day of the murder of Mr. Barrett occurred, she heard what we have come to learn were gunshots coming from the backyard. Afterwards, she saw Mrs. Barrett come back into the house through a private door that Mrs. Barrett never uses. Mr. Barrett died from gunshot wounds and a gun was recovered at the crime scene. Secondly, Dr. May testified that the bullet wounds were not self-inflicted, and the only people in the house that night was Mr. and Mrs. Barrett and their housekeeper, Mrs. Porter. But Mrs. Porter was in the kitchen when the gun went off, and then she fled the house. Also, there is no other entrance to get from the kitchen to the living room besides through the dining room. So if Mrs. Porter did shoot him, then she would have come the wrong way from where Mr. Barrett was limping. When Mrs. Barrett was asked by Officer Chaney, quote, if her husband had threatened her in any way before she shot him, she stated that, quote, he had not. Mrs. Barrett was very anxious and worried and was pacing up and down the halls, waiting for John to come home. Secondly, Mrs. Barrett claims that Mr. Barrett entered the living room, felt in his hands, ready to choke her. However, in her original statement, she said that Mr. Barrett joined her in the living room, sitting on the couch and drinking scotch. Not only is this far less threatening, but a bloodstain of Mr. Barrett's blood was found on the cushion that he was leaning back against on sofa number 2. Officer Chaney's report confirms that Mr. Barrett received his first gunshot wound in the arm while sitting on a couch having a conversation with his wife. Mr. Barrett also suffered 4 shots from behind. The first of these bullet wounds from behind occurred as he got up off the couch and began fleeing for his life. Mrs. Barrett follows him, shooting at him again and again, hitting him once more in the upper portion of the back of his right leg, causing him to start limping. Mr. Barrett was trying to escape, and Miss Porter testified that she saw Mr. Barrett limping away from Mrs. Barrett. When seeing Mr. Barrett round the dining room corner bleeding from gunshot wounds, and Mrs. Barrett come running after him, Miss Porter was so scared for her life that she fled the house. Mr. Barrett tried to limp out of the back of the house as well. This is when Mrs. Barrett shot him 3 more times. After chasing him into the dining room, Mrs. Barrett shot him twice in the back, then finished him off in cold-blooded execution style, with the final bullet and ultimately the one that took his life fired into the base of his skull. These 3 final bullets were all fired while he was laying helplessly face down on the dining room floor. If she was in danger, why would she follow him? After John started fleeing, she would have had the time to run away. Mr. Barrett was running from Mrs. Barrett, not towards her. Earlier, we heard from Officer Chaney that Barbara not only once, but continued to say, "I didn't mean to hurt John. Why did he have to hurt me so? I loved him. Why did he have to leave me?" Admitting that she did indeed hurt him. According to Dana's unscientifically proven phase scenarios and testimony, there are inconsistencies with what was supposed to happen and to what Mrs. Barrett testified to. If we are to believe Miss McGuire, then the space between phases would take weeks to months. On the night of the murder, Mrs. Barrett claims that John was coming at her with the belt in her hands, ready to choke her and kill her, which would be the second phase. But only 5 days ago, she also says that she was beaten almost to the point of death, which would be the second phase again. There would not be enough time for both the third and first cycle, which lasts from weeks to months, to happen in only 5 days. There is no proof other than the word of the defendant that he was actually physically abusive. She claimed in her second statement that these beatings ran in cycles, at least 3 to 4 times per year, but only after interviews with the psychologist, Miss Dana McGuire, who specializes in that field. Wouldn't one wonder why a fact as important as that would be left out of her original statement? Barbara met with her psychologist many times before giving her second statement, allowing her to change many facts, as we have proven in this courtroom today when questioning her. Another reason why Mrs. Barrett cannot be trusted and is not reliable is her husband was a defense lawyer. Her husband was an attorney, and he would tell her all about his cases, including one case about a woman shooting and killing her husband, allowing her to learn to cover up or defend herself if she found herself in a similar situation. We can finally conclude that she acted with malice aforethought, the wrongful intent to injure other because her actions were premeditated. Mr. Barrett told Mrs. Barrett just a few weeks before the murder that he thought their marriage was in difficulty. This caused Mrs. Barrett great sadness. Even Miss Porter acknowledged that she, Mrs. Barrett, was crying a lot, especially in the weeks leading up to the shooting. Mrs. Barrett was angry that after all these years of knowing he spent time with other women and still loving him through it, he was finally officially leaving her for someone else. On the day of the shooting, Miss Porter heard the same sound she heard when Mrs. Barrett shot and killed Mr. Barrett, coming from the backyard. She then saw Mrs. Barrett enter the house through a private door she never uses. She had a gun in her hand. Later, Miss Porter testified that there was no gun cabinet or safe anywhere in the living room. Mrs. Barrett would have had to previously stash the gun in the living room because even she herself said she left the dining room at dinner to go straight into the living room to pour herself a glass of wine. She did not go into another room to retrieve it. We have proved that Mrs. Barrett's life was not threatened on the night of the shooting, that Mr. Barrett was trying to run away from Mrs. Barrett and not towards her. We have proved that she had full awareness of what was happening on December 18th, 1988. We have proved that Mrs. Barrett, was caught practicing with her gun earlier that day and had a plan to murder her husband. We have proved that not only Barbara Barrett was guilty of this crime, but she did it with malice aforethought. We have proved all of this by showing you that Mrs. Barrett had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to commit this heinous crime. That's it.
Thank you. Is the defense ready to put on their closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
May it please the court and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My client, Barbara Barrett, was wrongfully accused of a crime she did not commit. From Barbara Barrett's and Dana McGuire's statements, it is obvious that Barbara was ruthlessly battered by John Barrett. But given her extreme dependency and the factor of learned helplessness, Barbara loved John very much. As an abused spouse, Barbara believed that the beatings were her fault, as if she had hurt John and deserved to be beat. On the night of Mr. Barrett's death, before he came home, Barbara was pacing with worry for the husband she loved. Before dinner, John told Barbara that he wanted a divorce. During dinner, John rudely ordered Barbara to leave because she was crying. Mrs. Barrett left, and John finished his dinner alone and went into the dining room. According to her testimony, Leigh Porter heard something like a car backfiring. The next thing we know is that Mrs. Barrett ran into the dining room with blood on him. That Mr. Barrett ran into the dining room with blood on him. Mrs. Barrett came to respond and help. During the next 10 minutes, we have no idea what happened at the Barrett's house. No idea. Leigh Porter fled the scene for a full 10 minutes, completely unaccounted for. Oddly, Leigh Porter returned back at the scene, still with the police officer there. Then, when Officer Chaney finally arrived, he took the information in his official police report from the dramatized Leigh Porter. When Officer Chaney arrived, he found Mrs. Barrett locked in the downstairs bathroom. He threatened to break down the door. After she came out, because of Officer Chaney's threats, she collapsed on the floor and fainted, just as you would expect any traumatized person to do. After she was revived, Officer Chaney sat Barbara down at the kitchen table. She thought John still wanted to leave because she had hurt his feelings. She started saying things like, "I didn't mean to hurt John." And we all know hurt does not mean kill, much less murder. Then Officer Chaney took Barbara to the police station. The crazy thing is that Barbara had just witnessed the murder of her husband she dearly loved and depended on. She was screaming and crying and even passed out. In spite of this all, Officer Chaney took her statement only 30 minutes later. And the overworked officer still expects that information she gave to be completely accurate. We all know that the bullet shot at Mr. Barrett could have been fired in any order based on Joe R. May's testimony. The issue today is murder. Once again, murder is the killing of another person with malice aforethought, either expressed or implied. During that night, no one saw a gun fired anywhere near Mr. Barrett, so no one can know who did it. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Barrett did not kill the man she loved. Dana McGuire showed us the battering cycle and what it does to women. She testified about learned helplessness and the extreme dependency women have toward their husbands. Barbara Allen Barrett testified how she loved him and couldn't live without him through her words and actions on that night. CM Chaney testified to his own mistakes and carelessness. He reported a gunshot wound to the left leg. When the autopsy reveals the right leg, he reported that the married couple of Mr. and Mrs. Barrett were strangers. Furthermore, we still don't know whether he misprinted the floor plan of the scene, or if there was never a door through which my client supposedly passed. He presumed information from Leigh Porter was factual without making sure it was true. He testified that he never saw someone shoot a gun that night, proving that he has no idea what happened, much less who did it. He also testified and reaffirmed that the details of the offense are unknown. During his questioning, He said that Barbara fell into his arms when she passed out. But his police report that says that she fell on the floor, proving him completely untrustworthy in what he says. Joe Armey proved that it is impossible to prove the order in which the bullets were fired at Mr. Barrett. Leigh Porter showed us a huge gap in time where no one could testify about what happened at the Barrett home. During that night, she never saw anybody shoot a gun. The best testimony she has to offer is hearing a car backfire. Even though she never saw bruises on Mrs. Barrett, she told us that there were 128 hours or more in a week when she never saw Mr. or Mrs. Barrett. She also proved to us that Mr. Barrett had a bad temper and was liable to throw things at people. She said she could have been so Mr. Barrett when he came, Now the opposing counsel wants you to believe that gun ownership makes my client a murderer. The truth is that gun ownership is a common protection. My client heard a frightful sound, came running with her gun to offer protection. Tragically, she was too late. While we know he was cruel and abusive, my client was horrified to see that her husband had been murdered. The prosecution must prove to you that the jury that Barbara Barrett killed John Barrett with malice aforethought. Kyle Hudson and my co-counsel Israel Vargas asked the jury to rule Barbara Barrett not guilty because she did not kill John Walker Barrett.
Right, thank you. Right, the court does not condone violence against anyone, including you, Ms. Barrett, but using lethal force was not justified under the circumstances that fatal evening. The court finds beyond a reasonable doubt that Barbara Barrett did commit murder in the first degree by shooting and killing John Walker Barrett, and therefore you are found guilty. You are now under house arrest, and you are not to leave your home until the South Carolina Sheriff's Office appears to take you to jail. Your sentence, which will begin when they pick you up, is to be for 5 years, and you will serve that, and you will be released upon the completion of those 5 years. And that concludes our trial.
Yay.
Good job.
Thank you, Judge Perwin. Good
Hey,
job, everybody.
Yeah, I was going to make a few comments now that we're done with the actual trial part. I think the defense did a fantastic job of trying to create reasonable doubt. You have some really difficult facts to overcome in the situation that you had. And I think that, you did everything that y'all could to create that doubt. It's a difficult case. And, I guess the problem is, and you can't put new facts into the case. Well, if it wasn't her, who would it be? Of course, Leigh Porter was pretty emotional about this, and I guess she could be a potential person to have done that. But I'd be more concerned about checking the money laying around the house more than I'd worry about her killing anyone. I don't think Leigh Porter was a murderer. But y'all did a great job. I think the prosecution did a fantastic job. I love the objections. Those were great.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the defense do a few more objections. One thing that I did see, there were a couple exhibits that people forgot to offer.
Right.
I think the prosecution had a couple, defense had one. But the issue is that if an exhibit is not offered, then they shouldn't be allowed to testify to it. So even though they didn't offer it, the other side didn't object to them using that exhibit. So it ended up coming in anyway. So nobody lost or won the case by not offering those exhibits, because basically they ended up coming in because the other side didn't object to them using those. But I thought y'all did a fantastic job. I thought the witnesses were good. I think Officer Chaney needs a real break. He's tired. I think you did a good job, but when you work as many hours and having that part-time job, I think that, you know, you're going to make mistakes, and the prosecution did a good job overcoming it, but the defense did a great job of pointing those things out. Those are real issues that happen in real cases. They really do make mistakes like that. And while those mistakes were not good, I didn't find that they were enough to overturn what I felt was beyond a reasonable doubt as far as the evidence. Any other comments from anybody?
If I may, I wanted to say that I am very proud of you all. That was a well done trial. I was impressed. I think you did a good job overcoming this sort of unusual format that we have to be in. And I really appreciate the fact that all of you maintained a level of professionalism with this, and you were very patient with working out the exhibits and getting those up on the screen and letting that have time to play out the right way it needed to. And so I just want to say that I'm very proud of you all. You did a great job, and I can tell that you definitely did work a great deal at preparing for this case, just as if you would have if we were actually going to go to a courtroom and try it in person altogether. Thank you very much for that.
And let me just say one other thing. For the defense attorneys, you have to understand that in a lot of situations, your job is not necessarily, you may not get a home run and get them to go free. But because of the evidence and the way that you presented it, her sentence was really kind of light.
Yeah.
You know, a 5-year sentence, because you did show through your expert and through your testimony that she probably was a battered woman. And even though your position was that she wasn't the one that did it at all, still the fact that you put on that, you created some sympathy for your witness or for your client. And that in turn, sometimes the defense attorney, their best hope is to just get them a less sentence than they would otherwise. So understand that that's still a victory for you, in the fact that she didn't get 20 years or life or the electric chair, and the prosecution still got a conviction. So to me, it was a win-win, because I think both of y'all, both sides did such a good job on this case.
I agree. Great job, everyone.
Thank you.
Great job with those.
Thank you, Judge Purwin. We really appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Well, make sure that Miss Barrett stays at that house until they come and pick her up. She disappeared for a second. I was a little worried about that.
That's funny.
She was getting away. No handcuffs this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, they'll be there, but they'll have to show up and bring them with them. So you better enjoy your time at the house, because it's not going to be the same at the big house.
So that actually brings up a good point. I thought the witnesses did a great job of role playing their character.
Yes.
Leigh Porter was incredibly dramatic for a role. And I love that kind of flippant attitude that she had about stuff. And she's like, no, of course not. You know, so that was great stuff. Barbara, Corey, you really came across as a believable, loving, devoted, sincere wife. Like, I truly believe that you were upset about John's death. And so you all did a great job. Evangeline, you came across as very professional as Dana McGuire, and you had your stuff and you knew it, Pat. You were able to give long-winded answers to questions. That was all very good. And of course, Officer Chaney, man, you are a cop. Like, I think you are a cop. Yes, that's right. That's the way it happened.
Yeah.
You're just very like stone cold, stone face, you know. I report to the scene and this is how I collect the evidence, and it came across very believable. And Joe May, I don't know how it is you can have such a light spirit and kind of light attitude, even though you look at dead bodies all day, every day. But somehow you came across very polite and kind of lighthearted. And yep, these are the bullet wounds, and here's the positions.
Don't worry, I wear goggles.
Good. So,
Well, and the good thing is when you're serious like that, it makes it appear that this is just, you're just reporting what science is showing. You don't have any emotions in this. You don't have any sides. You're just telling us like it is.
right.
And that's what an expert needs to do.
Yeah, it was great stuff from everyone. It
Are
really
you
was.
kidding me?
I didn't think Dr. McGuire is getting paid
Happened
enough.
again.
She needs to charge more if she's a doctor.
Well, these are 1988 rates or
Well,
something.
Oh, that's true.
That's right.
That's true.
Okay.
Great job, everybody.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. I really appreciate you taking your Friday afternoon to conduct our mock trial and host it and have it available on YouTube. That was great of you.
Well, I just want to make sure justice is served, and now we have another person that can't hurt anyone else off the streets, and that's important.
That's very important.
Yeah, that's important on a Friday, just as it would be on a Monday.
That's right.
Great. So are we having class again Monday?
We are.
Okay. All right.
Can we expect you?
Yes. Same time?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I will be.
Great job, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
Super impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Good
We're
job.
going to practice law one day.
Thanks again, Judge.
Ms. Newell, I'll let you end the meeting if you have the right to. Do you have the button where you can end the meeting as well, or?
I can only leave the meeting. I cannot end it. So
Okay.
you can
Does
go-
anyone have any questions before we do that?
I did have one question.
Sure.
I think Abby objected to one of the questions Israel asked Dana. She said it was speculation, but since Dana McGuire was an expert, couldn't she provide opinion testimony?
Yes, and I don't remember the exact question. It depends on if it relates to her expertise.
Okay.
And so sometimes if a judge sustains that objection, you can always turn around and say, well, Judge, she's an expert. Would you reconsider that? So you can point that out in case I missed that. I don't remember the exact question, but yes, experts can speculate as long as it's within their field of expertise.
If I remember it right, I think the question was, could Dana testify about what Barbara thought about something? So it's a little bit of a gray area there about
Right.
what that could be speculative, but if based on enough, information she got from Barbara in her sessions, she might have some good idea about that.
Right.
So
It's a gray area.
it
And
was
so
a tough call.
it doesn't hurt to say something in response, but speculation by an expert can come in if it's within their field.
Yeah. Okay. That was a good.
Any other questions? Does anyone want to be an attorney in the future? That's a good one right
A lot of
there.
work.
Did Leigh Porter raise her hand?
No.
You don't want to be an attorney? Well, I was going to say, you should be an actress.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's what I want to be. So.
Well, good job. You're on the right track.
Thank you.
I thought the prosecution, Abby, you seems like you were made for this. To me,
Yeah.
I would think that this is what you want to do. I don't know what you really want to do in life, but to me, you seem to be cut for this. I mean, I could have believed that you were a real prosecutor the way that you handled the case. Actually, both the prosecution did, but it just since you started, that's the one that I remembered. But neither one of y'all, as far as the prosecution, want to be an attorney or want to put people away. No.
Only their sisters.
Okay. And as far as Israel, did you like defending someone? Did you believe your client was innocent or guilty?
I believe she was innocent.
Okay, let me tell you one thing. When you're defending somebody in real life, the best defense attorneys, they don't want to know whether they are or not. It makes it harder on their job in a criminal environment. You don't necessarily want to know because it makes it harder for you to do your job.
Thanks.
Anything else?
No,
We'll
Joe.
go examine some more bodies, Mr.
Yeah,
May.
Don't worry. I'll
Don't
bring my
encourage
goggles.
them.
Well, no, they're already there. He didn't have anything to do with it. and we got Miss Barrett under control. Right. Well, we'll end this meeting, and y'all have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe out there.
Will do,
And
Judge.
good job by everybody.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Arrington, for helping us with
Monday.
all that.
Yeah, thank you.
No.
Who else is super tired?
Oh,
Everybody's probably exhausted now.
Me.
Kyle, you didn't raise. Oh, there it is.
now everyone got my message, right? I need like full body shots of everybody.